Okay, thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Wayne.
We have a wonderfully large group today. And I would especially like to welcome those people who are not already members of the Pasadena Village. I spoke to one of you before the meeting had started and learned that she and maybe other people learned about this program through Monica Hubbard's Wired Women, which many of us have gotten for many years. So we have a special thanks to Monica too today. And Monica is also a member of the village. Our topic today, options in how to get the care you need, I think is a really important thing to help us plan ahead as we get older. And we have two incredibly wonderful women to give a presentation today. First is Diane Kirbis. You want to just raise your hand, Diane? Diane is a retired nurse who now works in the what's generally called the placement field. She has a lot of experience, and we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Our second presenter is Lisa Bricker. Lisa also works in the placement area, and she also runs a support group for caregivers. Both Lisa and Diane are incredibly experienced, very professional, and also compassionate. So I would really like to welcome them today. Thank you. And you two should unmute yourselves.
Okay. All right. Lisa, you want to introduce yourself? Is that what you want us to do now, Sally?
I have one more comment.
Okay.
So should there be any questions, would you please put them on chat? I will be monitoring that. And at the end, we'll try to answer these questions. And any personal questions can go directly to Diane and Lisa at some point, but put your questions on chat.
Great, thank you. My name is Lisa Bricker, as Sally said, and the company I own is Gently Guided. And I'll give you a little bit of my background. I can go way back about the time I was born. My grandfather at 59 had a stroke and lived for almost 30 years. And I watched my grandmother take care of my grandfather. And he had dementia, vascular dementia. And then fast forward, in 2005, my father became ill with stage 3 lymphoma. And I was the daughter that stepped up to the plate and had no idea what I was getting myself into. And at the same time, my mother was showing signs of early dementia. She also had vascular dementia. And at that same time, it's a long way, my husband at 55 started showing signs of Alzheimer's.
Oh.
And, so kind of it turned my life upside down very quickly. And my father passed away fairly quickly. And then my mother moved in with us. And, one thing led to another. The most challenging thing was with my husband, my partner in life, at a young age, and he could present himself so well for so long that it took almost over 7 years to get a diagnosis. So I ended up taking my career as a coach. I used to work with professionals and entrepreneurial business owners in leadership. And eventually started just, I had to find a purpose through all of these challenges and the roller coaster ride and job losses on my husband's part. He was an attorney. And 10 years ago, I started doing this work. And the reason I do it is through everything I've seen, I want to be the person that I didn't have along the way, because there's a lot to navigate through, and all of a sudden you're isolated. There's a lot. We'll talk about that later. But over the years, I'm predominantly an Alzheimer's and dementia placement specialist. And so that is what I do. I can do any type of senior living, but this is my wheelhouse. This is what I know. And as I started saying recently, I'm bilingual. I speak Alzheimer's and dementia as well as English. So that's me in a nutshell. And I'm just really, really thrilled. And thank you for having us today. And I turn this over to Diane.
Thank you, Lisa. My name is Diane Kirbis, and I work for a company called Concepts for Living. And I am not only a retired nurse, I'm a retired nurse practitioner with over 40 years of experience in the field. I had a secondary subspecialty certification in palliative care, hospice care, and end-of-life care, which really starts kind of the day you're born, planning things. We plan for vacations, we plan for marriages, we plan for births most of the time. And aging and end of life is something that we should be planning for as well, because we don't know how it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, but it's nice to have some type of a plan in place if you're lucky enough to be able to control that situation. I was fortunate that I was able to take care of my parents at home with the help of caregivers and hospice. But even with the caregivers in the home, my sister and I still did most of the work. But my parents chose to be at home, and fortunately they were able to. But not everybody is able to do that. And when I retired from nursing right before COVID, I was introduced to the owner of Concepts, and it was a good fit with my background, being able to speak with people, knowing disease processes. We specialize in placement for everybody. And it's been a real learning experience. And I've worked with some incredible families and met some wonderful people, but it is very challenging. And I, like Lisa, am happy to be here. I'm very happy to be on the board of directors of the Pasadena Village and being able to help participate and coordinate some of these educational and health related topics. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'm gonna start pretty much reviewing the types of communities that are out there and our options if you are not able to live at home. We're also going to talk about how to figure out why you can't live at home and how that decision comes to. I'm sure you've all heard of nursing homes, and those are skilled nursing facilities and rehabs. And what those are designed for is if you've had a surgery or a fall or something similar where you need the services of a nurse. It also requires, it's medically driven, and Lisa and I do not place, or correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, we don't deal with nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities or rehabs. Where we come in is when you come out of the rehab and you can't go home, where would be an appropriate place for you to go. So we generally would be contacted either by a family member or the community or the skilled nursing facility to help find suitable housing after that. And the options are assisted living. I'm sorry, we'll start with independent living. And that is a area where you can move into a community and pretty much have your own apartment, have some services benefited from the community, such as housekeeping, meals, transportation, participation in activities. But you can come and go as you please, and they're there if you need them. There's 24-hour nursing at most of the independent livings because they're associated with assisted livings, and there's always a nurse available. The other option for care, and Lisa will talk more about it, are memory care units for people with dementia. So I'm not going to get into that too much. People often ask, why should I use a referral service? I can just find a place on my own. When you walk into a community and to look around and to know what to ask, what to look for, being able to disseminate all the information takes a tremendous amount of work. And if you are not familiar with communities or how they work, it can be confusing. It's our job to help you find that place. And I know Lisa, I'm sure, goes on tours with clients. So if you're looking at a place and you want company, we go with you so we can check it out ourselves and also provide you with some of the answers, give you some hints on what to look for and what to ask for. In addition, we're able to help you figure out if you need assisted living, independent living, memory care, etc. It is a lot to deal with, and that's what we do. Generally, when you call and you're interested in finding a community or just getting information on options for care, we ask that you work with one agency, one company. And the reason is the majority of the companies that are in existence now use the same database, and the communities are also connected to the database. So when you call us, we get all the information and then we send out referrals, etc., for the appropriate place. And when you call, they get your name and your phone number and you get placed in their database. So what happens is if we try to make a contact, they'll say, oh, Mr. Smith already contacted us, don't worry about it. And the reason why it's like that is there's no charge for our services, and we get a commission from the community where you're placed. And I was describing this recently to a client, and she asked me what my how would I decide about a community? Would it be depending upon how much my commission would be? And I said, no, that we work with the different communities and that we do what's best for the client, the family, and the community. Because also after Lisa and I do our evaluations and kind of help you decide where the best place for you to be, the communities also do an evaluation so they know if they're able to take care of you. Where am I going? Cost. People worry about the cost of these communities, and I don't blame you. The prices are pretty expensive. You're looking at $6,000 to $7,000 a month, and that may be for room and board. Care may be extra. Everything is very independent, and each community has its own rules. Some of the areas in Pasadena and communities that we both work with, which you probably heard of, are Villa Gardens and Montecedro. Mm-hmm. And you can either do a I don't want to get into the buy-in stuff because I'm afraid I'm going to get too confused. But the financial dynamics of each community are different, and we listen along with you. But once a decision is made about where you or someone you know may be placed or moved to, we kind of move away from the financial aspects. But the communities will require a financial review to make sure that you're going to be able to be taken care of. Generally, most of the places can have a month to month. So you may not have to make a commitment. You can try it for a month or so. If you don't like it, you can always leave. You're not held hostage. These are all independent choices, aside from perhaps memory care. And you can figure out what's best for you. And it's good to get an idea of what's available, what your needs might be as long-term, because things may be okay now, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And there are a lot of communities in the area that have independent living, assisted living, and even skilled nursing and memory care. So if you move into independent living and God forbid something happens and then you need assisted living, you're not moving from another community into another place. It's continuing care. And some people ask us, does Medicare or Medi-Cal pay for any of these services? Medicare does not pay for it. Long-term insurance does. Medi-Cal has a waiver program, but it also, given the fact that it's state-run, is very complicated, and you have to already be on Medi-Cal. The community that you're moving to also needs to accept Medi-Cal waiver. And they will also send someone out to do an evaluation, determine what your care needs are, and make a determination of how much they will subsidize the community you're living in. They don't pay for the whole thing. Are there any questions so far? I can't see the chat. I don't think there's anything there. Okay. Lisa?
Yeah.
Kind of talk fast.
Well, just kind of kind of go back in an overview, because it is a little bit confusing, right?
Yes,
There's
right.
a lot to navigate. Most places out there for senior living options are month to month. You move in, there's a 30-day notice or maybe a 60-day notice, whatever their contract is, typically a 30-day. And so you're not locked in to anything unless you are going to a buy-in community where you're putting up hundreds of thousands of dollars up front and then still paying monthly, but a little bit less. So those are different models.
Right.
We have a little bit of everything in our general community here. It's a wonderful, I love our community for senior living options and the resources we have in this area. I've worked all over LA and beyond doing this referral service work for 10 years. And now I'm just really centered in this area and the cohesiveness of our resources. I collaborate with a lot of professionals. We work as teams. It's really, really wonderful to really circle the wagon around a client and help them find that right fit. And so we're called referral services for senior living options. We're called placement, but one thing I think we want you to know is try to, if you're it's better to have a personal referral through someone locally. It's try to stay off the internet. Like Diane said, you're going to get caught in somebody's big net and chances are they've never even stepped foot in our options around here. And then you'll be bombarded with emails and phone calls. You don't need that. They don't play fair in the sandbox, as we say.
It's a good way to describe it. Definitely.
Yeah. So that's the experience. And the beautiful thing is that both Diane and I are very hands-on, and we provide a personal, more concierge service to our clients. And when someone calls me, It's really, we do this intake to really find out what our client, what that loved one, usually it's somebody calling for somebody. Sometimes it's for calling for themselves, but usually you're calling for a loved one in my case, and you're wanting to find, you have a certain budget amount that you're working on. You're wanting, I like to be a good matchmaker. I like to find that personality, the care needs. It's a little formula. And then I think
Right.
of, we think of what's the best fit, and not to give you too many options, but the bottom line is to give you enough options so that you, not a lot, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 2, sometimes there's only 1, depending on the care needs, depending on the circumstances. But we want you to make sure that you don't have any bad choices. Sometimes if you go to the bigger places, they'll give you a list of 20, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So narrowing that down. So when someone is in need of care and they're still at home, a lot of times people bring in-home care. We both have our favorites and of home care agencies we
Right.
work with. Not all home care agencies are created equally. So some are better managed than others and better run. And so those are part of the resources in our tool bag. And and it's really nice because the small referral services, placement agencies in the LA area, we collaborate a lot with each other. Say I get a referral out in the Valley or in LA or Orange County or in another state, I will reach out to them, and we will work together to find that location because they know the providers and those resources in that area. So, because we want our clients well held throughout this process,
Right.
very hands-on. So if you're thinking about bringing in home care, we do suggest that you go through an agency, which is sadly the most expensive type of option for senior living you can have, because the rates are now, past COVID, beginning at $35 an hour and up, and the staffing is hard to come by. Some agencies have done a really, really good job keeping their caregivers and keeping them busy. But now you can be $15,000 to $25,000 to $30,000 a month. It is almost cost prohibitive unless it's a short-term need, unless you have unlimited funds, which most people don't. But the other thing is, a lot of people they'll hear of somebody that
A friend of a friend. Yes.
a friend of a friend, they had a caregiver, and you really have to be careful, right, Diane? Because
Yes.
now
There's horror stories out there.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of scams. Now you're not only have a loved one that needs care, or yourself needs care, you're also an employer, which you don't have to deal with as working with an agency. And the next thing, we hear the worst of the stories, of course, where all of a sudden you've got a caregiver that needs a car because they're, and it's just one thing that leads to another, things that are missing. So we're just kind of saying, kind of buyer beware here, and we want you to be educated and informed, and use resources like Diane and I to get good resources out there. The one thing that we have in our area that is really wonderful, we have a lot of great board and care homes in our area. And we work closely with those owners and administrators. And that's when someone needs more eyes on them as I'm going to say, as Sally's husband needed more eyes on him. And that's really important, where most of our board and care homes, these are residential homes in residential neighborhoods that are retrofitted and licensed just like any other type of assisted living in the state of California. And they have 6 residents. And typically in our area, they have 2 caregivers per day for 6 residents and a full wake staff at night. And those prices around here, we can, if you're going to Glendale, you might find a 5,000 or 5,500, but ours start around 6 and go up around here. The care is excellent, but better to go through an agency, because it's like the same with like memory care. I deal a lot with the memory care options in our area here. And I'm aware, I've got my finger on the pulse. I know when there's management changes or ownership changes, watching that, because sometimes I'm not quite happy with how things are going within those communities if they're going through too many changes, because it has to be about the residents. And that's the most important thing. So that's my job. That's Diane's job. We're on top of that type of, all that is on our radar when we're working and out there, because this is our credibility and this is our name.
Right.
So when it comes to no longer being able to stay at home, I'm usually, it's a lot of factors. It's wonderful to be able to stay at home if you can, but it's sometimes too hard on the loved one caring for that person at home. The mental and physical drain of caring for someone with any type of dementia is just, it gets to a point where it compromises the health and quality of life for the person caring. And a typical scenario is the person that is having the problems is actually better cared for, and the caregiver can end up in the hospital with some serious illnesses if they're not careful. You can get in over your head and not quite understand. I call it caregiver spin. We get spun into, we don't even know. This happened to me. That's why I talk about this. I had to call 911 on myself.
Wow.
Once in 2013. That was when I started changing and having to really take care of myself. This stuff's real. And it's when I had to move my husband in 2016. And then he was in assisted living memory care and did really well. He hated it at first. And it was really it was the hardest decision I ever had to make in my life. And if you ever have to make that decision, it's the hardest decision you'll ever have to make too. And yet you can get to the other side of it. You're still in charge. You're still a family caregiver. And yet they're safe. They have a quality of life, and you can have peace of mind, and you can visit and return to the role that you were, whether it's
You can be a wife, yes, a spouse,
Yes.
instead of a caregiver,
sister,
or a daughter, sister, whatever.
Exactly. The one thing everybody needs to know if you move into any type of assisted living in the state of California is every provider requires a physician's report and Form 602A. It's a state required form. It's a 6-page form that indicates that person moving in, their physical abilities, their cognitive abilities, their prescriptions. It's the template that the senior living options use to provide the care plan, and they have to have that on file. That is the key to the kingdom. There's there's other things that you need, but that's the one thing that you need. So is there anything else you can add to that, Diane?
Thank you. Yes, this is something, and maybe you glean from what Lisa just said, this is something that doesn't happen overnight. Often we get calls from family members that are desperate and say, my mother's at home, I can't take care of her anymore, you need to find me a place. What we have to look at, number one, is what the needs of the person are. 2, the budget, unfortunately, is a reality. 3, the availability. With the aging population and the increase with chronic illness, dementia, etc., board and care homes are full most of the time. That's their goal, to keep them filled. Assisted livings, sometimes there's a waiting list. People have a lot of requests when they need to move. Private room, shared room, etc. And sometimes a little compromise has to be made for the best care that they can afford or what's available at the time. So one of the key things that Lisa and I are interested in are people planning for the future. And we can certainly assist with that. Not that anybody needs it right now, but to have some idea what to expect. And it's amazing that people think that we can just, move somebody into a community in a couple of days. Getting the doctor's form, that 602A form alone, can take weeks, because doctors don't like to sit down and fill out 6 pages of information. So in talking with your friends, or if you know somebody, those are things to think about.
Yeah. The other thing that occurs when you're at home is you can become so isolated. And that is a huge, not only stress, but isolation. And everyone here, and whether you're in the Pasadena Village or whatever, it sounds like you're very active. So that's really wonderful, because the social network is so important. I think we've really undervalued that connection. We are humans. We all experienced it during COVID. But my journey of 15 years with my husband, he passed away 2.5 years ago. I was very isolated, and the world just seems to be passing you by, and they are isolated too. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's just that's what I'm just sharing. And I don't know everybody's own situation, or it's just good to be aware, because we can't educate enough. What I find too is maybe someone is all of a sudden in the hospital and they've never really been hospitalized before. Their loved one has a urinary tract infection and they had to call 911, and now there's there are lots of needs for resources of navigating through the hospitals, navigating your way through skilled nursing, because all of a sudden you're in a different universe. Medical environments is the Department of Health Services, and that's another world completely. Diane knows a lot more about it than I do, but it is confusing, and you have to know the drill, and you want to choose your battles as a
right
in that area. But it's assisted living, independent living, that's connected with assisted living or memory care or a boarding care is all under the Department of Social Services. These are social models, and you can bring in medical care as needed, or they'll have a nurse on staff. So it's a different license, it's a different model, and they are homes, to think of that. And it's just a different way of living.
I don't know if all of you received AARP magazine, the issue that just came, the bulletin for September of 2022 on page 26 is under the heading of your money, your all-in-one retirement home. Yes, and it does talk about a lot of the communities and things that Lisa and I were speaking about. The only thing it doesn't include, which I think I might send the author an email, is he doesn't mention placement advisors, where people can, like us, can help you. It gives a little bit of information, but it's good to give, it gives you a background, and it's good to read if you have it.
Great, good.
Okay, we have not received any questions through.
Oh, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Okay, so.
I have a
I'm going to-
question.
I'm
I
going
can't see chat. I'm visually
Okay.
impaired.
Okay,
Okay,
so
So
I
I'm
was
gonna
going
just,
to invite people to unmute themselves individually and ask a question. So, but raise your hand. Karen, go ahead with a question.
I just didn't want to miss the opportunity. You know, this has been very interesting and I really appreciate it. And I know that the service that you provide is very important because my daughter had to use that for her finding a home for her father. But what about people who don't have those kind of means?
Who don't, what? Wait, you got frozen.
Okay,
I
What-
heard her. I
what,
heard. Oh, she is freezing.
yes.
Now,
okay, sorry.
you, Karen, if you can hear me, you know, this is, we do come across people. I don't come across it as much. I actually came across it this morning, but I used to get a lot of these calls where people don't have the money for long-term care. And it's kind of, I'm just going to say it, our system's a bit broken.
Yes.
And so everything out there that we do is private pay. It's about the Medicare system is so, it's very complicated. Every time I try to go in and understand it, I just get so twisted around. I do. There's Medi-Cal long-term, and that's typically in a skilled nursing facility. Long-term, you have to find a bed. I have to admit that during my own journey with my husband, my driving force was keeping him. We had a very small long-term care policy that I was able to stretch from 3 years to 5 years.
Wow.
With a lot of strategy. So I'm all about the strategy, but my driving force was trying not to have him be in a Medi-Cal facility because it's a different license, remember? And they don't always have to be trained in dementia. So you get it's a whole other world. And so, you know, the population I work with is mainly loved ones with, someone with a loved one with dementia. But it's out there, and I typically refer to there is a placement service that does placement in skilled nursing on Medi-Cal, and they do new intake and they take the application and they help place. There's also something called the Assisted Living Waiver Program. Let's hope that these programs, I think these programs, now that we have a new department, a refreshed Department of Aging as of this year, moving forward, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that there are more resources out there that will come about. We happen to have a governor that has had a commitment finally to seniors and taking care of them and providing. I know I've been an advocate through Alzheimer's Los Angeles for many years, and I'm on the public policy committee. I'm on their programs committee. And finally, we've had funding through several governors that would not budge and did not give a penny for Alzheimer's. And we're now seeing more money come through for seniors in general. So maybe there's hope, but I'm not holding my breath.
And we also, I will refer to some outside agencies that help people with lower incomes, Jewish Family Services, Helping Hands. So
Yeah.
even if I can't help, I'm able to provide some type of a resource.
Yes, we have Pasadena PACE, which is Wellbe Health in our area. And there's just kind of trying to fit certain resources together to make that work. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any more comments? And another,
I had a comment. I used to counsel people as a social worker about their financial situation. And oftentimes my patients, their only major asset was their house.
Yeah.
If they were lucky enough to have a house that was paid off. And otherwise they had, almost nothing. And they needed advice on how to use that house to pay for their care. And sometimes it got very complicated, especially if there was a lot of family members with different opinions. Because if you're looking long-term, you have to decide whether if you're going to take a reverse mortgage out and compromise your only asset and make it unavailable if you need to move to a care facility. A reverse mortgage, for instance, gives you extra income for a while, but then when you leave the house, you have to pay it back.
Mhm.
And it's not always to your advantage. Otherwise, it's basically selling your house and using the assets to pay for your care. And then where do you go and how long will that money last? Fortunately, with the appreciation that we have here in California, people's houses are going for a lot more than they ever paid for them. And that money can be used basically, if they are careful, to last them the rest of their lives.
And there are real estate, oh, sorry, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead.
There are real estate agents that are especially certified in assisting seniors with selling their homes and managing the finances if you do have to move to a care community. So if the only asset you have is the home and it needs to be sold in order to move, it's also important to pick a professional that's experienced and certified in dealing with seniors and their special needs, and have the best way to maximize the financial success of selling your home.
Yeah.
And it is a special license.
Or they can help you determine, because of the size of the
Right.
asset, if you need to rent the home out, or what is the strategy. And I think when you're addressing something really important, is that it's so important to gather information to educate yourself. We can't educate enough to make these plans, because so many people find themselves in a crisis, or that they didn't think they'd ever be in. So that's a really good point. And how wonderful that you are doing these types of presentations so that you can gather some additional information and just begin to fill in and connect the dots for yourself,
Yeah.
Anyone else? I would love, if anyone else doesn't have a question, I would love for Sally to share some of her experience, and known you a long time now, and you're inspiring, very much so,
Oh.
you're,
Thank you. I think those people who know me know that my husband, Mike, developed a form of dementia. He has lived in a boarded care home for about 3 years now. But my process started probably 3 or 4 years before that. And one of the general things I like to say to people is don't be afraid of gathering information. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to make a decision right away if you start gathering information soon enough. When I realized that Mike was having some cognitive issues, one of the first things I did is something we haven't talked about yet today, that is also another expense, but I hired a geriatric care manager to do an assessment of my husband, myself, and our living situation. And that was at a time when my husband could still participate in the evaluation. Then the caregiver helped me arrange a family meeting because Mike and I married. I was in my late 40s. He was in his 50s. Our children were grown. So between us, we had 7 children, 7 adult children, and multiple grandchildren who, of course, were cared about both of us and had a right to be involved. And we had a family meeting, and the care manager helped me articulate what was going on with me, what I needed, and what Mike needed. And I feel immense gratitude, but we all ended up on the same page. And that was probably 2 years before my husband, it became obvious that my husband needed more care than I could provide myself or with part-time people in our home, which we did have. And they were actually really good for him. It was hard for me to take him out because he would get upset with my driving or any other thing, but the caregiver would take him out and he was perfectly wonderful. So it relieved a stress on me and actually allowed him to continue to go out and do things without me, which was better for both of us. I talked to my children and Mike's children probably 8 months before Mike actually moved. And I said to them, I'm not sure how longer this situation that we have now is going to work. And I want to plan for what might have to happen next. And it was at that point that my care manager told me about Lisa Bricker. And I met with her. She came to the house. She met with me and with Mike to find out where Mike was, what kind of person he was. And then we talked, as she said, about money. I'm privileged in that, at least for the moment, there is enough money to provide for his care and still keep resources for my care should I need it. Lisa helped me by asking important kinds of questions, helped me pare down what I was going to look at. I thought it would just be too much. I could not go to dozens of facilities and keep my sanity. And so we went to 3 places. 3 different kinds of places. And the next step was I invited 2 of Mike's children who live closer to come and also visit the places. And so we made a family decision about what would be best for Mike. And it was something I kept in mind the entire time. This person I loved needed more care than I could give, and what kind of situation would provide him the best care. And Lisa was instrumental in helping me do that. Mike moved, I said, a little over 3 years ago. He is well cared for. He is generally happy. The caregivers there like him. I can visit anytime I want to. His children can visit anytime they want to. And they managed, even through COVID, to provide excellent care, and no one there ever got COVID.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to point out that Sally is still a caregiver.
Yes.
Simply because Mike is living elsewhere, it does not mean that she's no longer the caregiver.
That's
Nor
right.
a wife.
I just say, you know, you're still the caregiver, you're still in charge, but you have a bigger team. And so you want to have your loved one ideally in a place where the communication is really good and you feel like you're part of the family and you're comfortable. It's as important that you're comfortable as a family caregiver in the environment where your loved one is, because you're visiting and you want to be there. Yeah. However it works for you.
You know, Wayne?
Since so many people in the village are single, I'm just wondering, one of the problems I encountered in going out to see people that were having problems was that they were alone and nobody had noticed that they had started slipping mentally. And I just wonder how many people who live alone have somebody who would notice and then take action about what would need to be done at some point.
That's a really good question. You know, sometimes I get calls from neighbors or friends of friends and they're concerned, but you run into a bit of an issue because whoever, you know, here's another good point. Really bring if you have an estate plan and a trust, a living trust, you want to really make sure you're updated at least every 3 years to review that, an attorney, estate planning attorney, an elder law attorney, that you've got everything you need, because the laws, everything changes and you want to make, and your own situation changes. So you want to make sure that you're up to speed. Now, if you have a neighbor that's going through this, say, you don't have power of attorney for that person unless they've given it to you. You don't have the capacity. That's really important to have the healthcare directives up to date. The power, any type of power of attorney should be in line with what is needed currently. And the problem is with Alzheimer's and dementia, that person granting someone else power of attorney has to be in their right mind. So fortunately, my husband was willing for me to do that. And I actually had full power of attorney. And he trusted me enough to really do that for him. And I ended up having to become his conservator. And that's a long story. But go what, Sally?
I was just going to say, because I didn't talk about that, that was something else. Well, two things. One of which is the Village Education Committee has had programs and will have programs in the future on wills and trusts, power of attorney,
Really good.
advanced directives for healthcare and power of attorney for that. And I was lucky enough to join the village soon enough that I went to those and I learned from them and was able to use them. And in fact, was able to update our trust and get power of attorney for Mike while he still had capacity. And at the same time, I set it up so that if I lose capacity myself, my daughter, my oldest daughter has power of attorney already. And I trust her with that. And, you know, it's so much easier to think about all of these things if you can force yourself to when it's not an emergency.
Right, exactly.
Okay, Sharon has a question.
Well, not a question, but a
A
comment
comment.
relative to what Wayne has just made us aware of, which is that an increasing number of people over 65 are alone and have no family, either because they don't have a family or they're so divorced from them emotionally that, you know, it's a rended relationship. And I recently had, excuse me, to make the decision to hire a fiduciary for myself to be the executor of my trust. And that was a hard decision. I talked to what little family I have. I'm the youngest. And they said, you know, I'm taking care of my husband, my in-laws, and having gone through 8.5 years taking care of my father, I know what I would be asking them to do. And so I made this decision, and it's a tough decision to make. I'm developing a very nice relationship with the person. And to the point that he has encouraged me to meet with a case manager just to begin a preliminary conversation. And
Interesting.
so
That's fantastic.
Yes.
It's such a confronting thing we have to look at, right? Where all these things were, and yet it does give us some peace of mind. And I
yes,
just share a little bit personally. My son was my power of attorney. And then after my husband died, I really gave it some thought because one, he lives in Northern California. And then two, he doesn't know he's not really in tune with what I may need, right? So I chose two local people, one to be my healthcare, on my healthcare directive as power of attorney. And I also chose a fiduciary. Just, it was like, oh, they know all the, you know, I can communicate all those little things and they will be able to navigate for me. So yes, it's those little things of what, and it was actually one of those moments where it was like, oh my gosh, what if I'm in skilled nursing after a hospitalization, or I'm in the hospital and I can't communicate what I need, and nobody around me knows what I need or want or what my wishes were. Kind of back into it, because we never know what can occur, and we might have a stroke, or we can't speak, or we don't know. So we want to be as prepared as possible. It's great. Yes,
Karen.
Karen.
I would like to just add one thing. Listening to Sally, I admire you, Sally, for the way you engaged your whole family and why you engaged your whole family. And I engage all of my kids in decisions I make. And when I've reviewed my my trust. They're all welcome to come to the meeting and ask questions. That way, I just feel like I want all of them to understand, what I have and what I want, and we can hammer out any questions we have, and that keeps everybody on the same page. And we meet as a family about every 6 months to a year to just kind of review things in general. And it brings us closer together, but it has a real solid purpose as well.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I want to mention that I had an experience with, not so long ago, with a friend who has no family. And some years before, she had asked if I would be medical power of attorney. And because we had similar ideas about end of life, I said, sure, not thinking of what that could mean in the future. It turns out that her affairs were handled by a fiduciary, which she had also engaged at that time. But it ended up that she had run through all of the reverse mortgage. The bank wouldn't lend her any more money, even though the house was worth a couple of $1 million. And it was necessary to place her. And Lisa helped me and a couple of other friends who served as her family to look at places, and knowing, and it helped that we knew who she was and what kind of a situation she would feel comfortable in. And we found what we thought was the most comfortable. It wasn't easy. And true to fact, and she was moved, and it was successful as it could be. And true to form, after she died, her house was sold for many millions. We have these assets, but that doesn't mean that we can use them. She either was going to stay in her home, or she was going to need to move to a facility that was comfortable for her. And that's what we were able to do. Lisa was so helpful there. But had I not agreed to have that power of attorney, she would have been a bit up a creek. And the fiduciary probably would have had to find something. But I was a friend, and I knew her in a particular way, and was able to engage other friends who loved her. And that's something to keep in mind when you choose someone.
I think also it's what we're hearing here is that you have to open your mind and your heart and have those conversations. And it's hard, but it's necessary so that people like Barbara can make happen what this lady needed.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is. And that was a very loving thing you did, Barbara, you and your friends.
Yeah, we felt like daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew exactly
Or
what you needed.
Nieces. We called them.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the bottom line is, if you can help it, don't back yourself into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave your family and friends up a creek.
Yeah.
Not knowing anything.
Yeah, it's really important.
I've dealt with many, many families that it's just been a nightmare because the discussions were not, and I started doing palliative and hospice care like 20 years ago, before physicians and people really wanted to talk about it, and discussing code status and feeding tube, no feeding tube, etc. And there's so much to take into consideration, and people don't have any idea what to expect. And what I want everything done. I talked to families that had a 90-year-old frail little mother, and they wanted everything done to keep her alive. And it was just, trying to be compassionate and empathetic, but really explain the reality was very challenging, but it was rewarding, especially if they listen.
Yeah.
People see medical stuff on TV and think that's the way it really is. And until you've seen someone that you love being resuscitated medically by a team, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Yeah,
And what,
Mhm.
yeah.
Are there any other
Thank you.
comments or questions? And Lisa and Diane, perhaps in chat, you can leave your contact information,
oh, great.
or any one of you can ask. Oh,
Because not
here's
everybody has
Priyanka,
access.
Pasadena Village, Priyanka.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself to all the members and everybody. I'm Priyanka. I'm the new membership and volunteer services coordinator. And I
Welcome.
wanted thank you. I wanted to thank Diane and Lisa for giving such wonderful information. This is a
Thank
lot of stuff that I didn't really know about or haven't really thought about, but I think it's going to be really helpful for when my own parents get older or for my grandparents. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Please feel free to reach out to either one of us. And I even have my daughter, you know, when she used to horseback ride when she was a kid. And I was talking to her, she must have been 9 or 10. And I said, what would happen if you fell off a horse and you hit your head and you didn't wake up? Would you want to be on a machine? Or would you want mom and dad to kiss you goodnight and let you go? She said, I don't want to be on machines. I know, I hear you talk. I don't want that. So even, you know, I don't know how old you are, but you don't think about those types of things, or even making your simple wishes known to your family, that if God forbid something horrible should happen to you, what you would want.
Exactly. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to give all this wonderful information. And I wanted to thank everybody for also sharing their stories, like Sally, and Sharon and Barbara, and for Wayne and Karin Tass for asking so many questions, because I feel like these things are so productive because so many people get involved. And so I just really appreciate it. And I feel like I learned so much. So thank you, everybody.
That's great. Thank you.
It was an excellent presentation. Thank you very, very much.
Oops, I forgot to put my phone number in. Okay, let's try again.
Okay.
I also really like that so many other members of the village made really good contributions. And I think it's a testament to what the village has become. We really are a community.
Mhm.
It's wonderful. And I just want to wrap up. I wanted to go back and address Wayne's statement about so many seniors are alone and isolated, and that is so true. One thing you can do if you do see something, even if you don't have power of attorney, is you can start calling APS, Adult Protective Services, and at least get that person on the radar. Social workers will, show up at a home and get it. There's not a lot you can do other than just finding out who that person's relatives are, if they have any or anyone, but those are challenging situations. And that's one of those areas where hopefully with more money coming into the state, it will filter down into more funding and resources that are more readily available. So I just thank you. And I think Wayne, you've been on some of the presentations I've been on. I know I recognize you and appreciate you being here.
No problem.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay, so
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And please feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Yes.
okay.
So much.
Thank you.
So Diane, you have left. Yes. Okay.
Yes,
There's Jans, and Lisa, you will leave your information on
I
chat.
you
did.
did as well.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yes,
There it is.
okay, excellent.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a great day.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.